It's 200 years or so since the appearance of the first of a series of inventions that used electricity to transform the way most people live their lives, and still some people today can barely change a light bulb. When it comes to fixing the video machine or dealing with a computer that freezes before our very eyes, we're as helpless as a baby. We may use the technology freely, but we hardly understand the principles that we are so dependent on. How many of us could invent electricity and the multitude of electric devices that we use every day? Easier said than done. Well, a look at some of the people who gave us these gifts brings new respect for the original genius of our inventors, not to mention making us feel humble regarding our own dependence on their achievements. Although some of the first steps in the process of invention originated in Europe, including the development of the battery by Alessandro Volta, from whose name we get the word voltage, it is not surprising that the first real uses of electricity for commercial purposes took place in the boom years before the Civil War in the United States. The idea of the telegraph emerged in the early 1830s from the work of Joseph Henry, who adapted the theory of electromagnetism. Henry's name is little known because his idea was adopted and patented by Samuel Morse, from whom we get Morse code, although Henry seems not to have been bitter about what happened. The first commercial telegraph line opened between Washington and Baltimore in 1844. Its impact on the conduct of business was immediate and profound. In 1875, Alexander Bell used his experiences as a teacher of deaf children to make an electric current reflect voice patterns. Bell and his telephone also owed a considerable debt to Henry, who had given him some early advice on how to proceed. Henry is surely the unrecognized hero in these stories. We'd like to think that we're pretty sophisticated these days, with our emails, faxes, etc., but give us some wire, wood, and a few other parts of an old phone and see how we'd get along. I doubt if any one of us today could come up with something that worked. Next came Thomas Edison's light bulb in 1878, and then the electric motor. The social and economic effects of these inventions were enormous. Electric streetcars meant that people could live much farther from where they worked, and so suburbs grew around the major American cities. Once elevators solved the problem of going up and down many flights of stairs, it became possible to build tall buildings in those cities. But all of this is no easily attained success story. Initial attempts to lay a telegraph cable in the Atlantic in the 1850s and early 60s ended in failure. Given the distances and pressures involved, it's natural that a number of cables just snapped. The line that finally worked was laid in 1866 and is presumably still in place, although long unused. Then there is the brilliant work of Heinrich Hertz, from whose name we get the word Hertz. The German experimenter died in 1894, aged only 36, but much of his work was picked up by an Italian, Guglielmo Marconi, who developed the wireless telegraph a few years later. Think of it, sending messages through the air. Were you transported back 100 years, would you be able to come up with something like that? The next step was radio, then television, the internet, cell phones. It's easy to take these for granted. But recalling the stories of the amazing inventors who paved the way, and their many trials and hardships, makes us realize that nothing would have been achieved without their blood, sweat, and often long-forgotten tears.